that moved as an amendment?
Oh, yeah, I'd like to move this as an amendment.
Great. And we have Council Vice President Goodman.
Okay, thank you. And first of all, I want to say I appreciate what you're trying to address with this amendment, but I want to make sure we kind of take a step back, and I want to invite up Robin, please, or whoever would be the best person, maybe Deputy Chief Glampy. I just want to make sure I'm getting first a good background in refreshing us on what already was appropriated within existing resources and within the last year's budget, or the 2016 budget, to address these issues, and how you are currently analyzing how your resources will be able to accommodate the data practices issues, because again, this kind of gets more to continued cost analysis, and as well as what type of program we need to have and want to have to assess these things. And then I might go back and ask some questions that are a little bit more specific to what's in the motion. And then, do you have a copy of the motion? So I might just ask too that staff be able to take a look at the motion so that they are having that in front of them as we're talking.
Ms. McPherson.
Okay. Mr. Chair, council members, I think we're going to make this a two-part question. If you don't mind, I'll talk about first what's included in the budget for 2016, and then DC Glampy will talk about the program itself and anticipated needs. As far as the 2016 budget, there is $1.8 million in the Minneapolis Police Department budget for the body cameras specifically. That is made up of $600,000 for that was received through the federal grant that we applied for last year, $600,000 for the CARS program, $400,000 that was allocated by the mayor in the mayor's budget for additional general funds, and then 2 FTEs, which came to a total of $170,000. So the sum total in the budget is actually $1.77 thousand within the budget itself. With the current what we've projected in public safety, the actual cost for the first year we're estimating at $1.65 million, and that includes the two FTEs for this. So it's below what is in our budget for 2016. Again, these are estimates.
Okay.
Deputy Chief.
And Mr. Chair, Vice President, to speak to what we're doing currently, right now as the program goes, we're in a bit of a hiatus since we ended, and we're getting ready to gear back up. We have one person dedicated to doing, actually 1.5 FTEs dedicated to doing body cam redaction work and data practice work, along with everything else that they do for the records unit. So we don't have somebody specifically right now dedicated to just body cameras. The plan going forward is to have those two bodies doing nothing but body camera work going forward once the plan gets up and we get these folks hired.
Okay, because you haven't yet hired the 2 positions that were allocated in the 2016 budget.
Yes, ma'am, that's exactly the direct. We're actually in the process of hiring them right now. So hopefully the goal is when the body cameras come online in May, these folks are ready to go and we can hit the ground running with those 2 bodies.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think I have a couple of questions that are maybe to the author a little bit and maybe to staff as well. But your motion would anticipate adding 2 staff in addition to the 2 staff that are yet to be hired by the police department that will be dedicated. So I just want to make sure first I have clarity with what you're seeking.
So yes, the 2 people that are the video analysts, this isn't actually part of that kind of work. This is to help the Records Information Unit deal with the managed public data requests, right? So a specific public data request that would be appropriate for a video analyst, my understanding is, would say, I need this point to this point for the specific officer for the specific footage.
Pulling data, you're saying, from the video.
That would be the video analyst position, right? The record information unit manages public data requests in something that would be like, give me all public information about X incident or Y incident, right? And so that involves police reports, that involves a coordination of different kinds of information. That is what we are getting so very far behind in the records information unit. And that's where I see a need to supplement that, because we will work in coordination with our city clerk's office. 1 in 6 requests into the city clerk's office have to deal with police requests, and with that, the group that is ultimately accountable, the city clerk's office, can only work with the records information unit in helping to prepare that. I'm happy to ask Christian Romohoff to come
Right.
up.
So this is where I'm getting a little bit tangled up in, is this really a capacity issue for the police department and their role in managing data requests, or is this part of a capacity issue for the city clerk's office as the central coordinating point for ensuring data requests are properly responded to and recording all of that? So I'm getting a little tangled, and I also feel like we're a little bit deep in here into talking about the particulars of who does what, which may be more needing to get a staff proposal to us on what are those particulars and how would they be accomplished and what would be needed with additional staff resources, and how would we assess are those additional staff resources needed and when?
Mm-hmm. If I may ask Christian Romohoff to provide some context of that. I originally started this with the city clerk's office in mind, and it's come up in this way. Mr. Romohoff.
Mr. Romohoff, please.
Commissioner Quincy, council members. Thank you. So as I understand it, the proposed staff direction is looking for bodies to go into the police department, not the city clerk's office. The city clerk's office plays a role where the city clerk is a responsible authority charged with managing public data requests, also charged with acting as sort of an ombudsman when requesters need additional help or have problems with how the city is responding. So we work very closely with all departments, but especially with the police department. The police department receives one of the largest number of data requests of any departments. So we work in close coordination. The Police Records Information Management or Records Information Unit, that's the department that handles, just as Councilmember Palmisano said, handles these complex requests that come in. They need some research. There can be transactional pieces, such as simply printing and providing a report. There can be some investigation that needs to be done. So, for example, even a simple accident where there's a report may involve squad cameras or street cameras. It may involve digging into what the police report says so they can find additional information. That's the unit that has a significant backlog. And where the clerk's office intersects with them is both helping direct requests to them, but also in handling questions and concerns from the public when timing or the data responsiveness complaints come up. They come to the city clerk, and then we work with the police to resolve the complaints. So that's largely our role. The additional 2 FTEs in the Records Information Unit would, my understanding, is largely address the current backlog. We work with in a business process improvement piece, we worked with the police in September. We identified there's about 100 hours of work each week that are not being accomplished. There's just simply backlog because of the increase of work. In 2015, January 1st, second chance law moved expungements to become much easier. That greatly increased the expungement piece for that unit. As Councilman Palmisano said, 400% increase over the last 4 years in requests.
So, and Okay, so this sounds like I'm going to turn then to a question that's probably a little bit more for Deputy Chief and then also for Councilmember Palmisano. I'll just say from your presentation, Mr. Remmelhoff, it kind of sounds like these are two positions not for body camera work, which hasn't started yet, but for existing work within the department where there may be some backlog issues, because that's what you said, backlog, and there's no backlog on body cams because they're not in use yet. So I just want to say that might be a change to the language in the staff direction, because this does talk about staff positions that are specific to supporting the work around body cameras. And I just want to make sure if that's not where the need is, if there is a need, then we have enough flexibility to allow coverage to meet the need. And so maybe that's something to respond to. And then I'll just state a comment that's more of a philosophy on approach here. So I'm open to understanding, are there needs in the department that we're not sufficiently resourcing that kind of relate to requirements of the city to respond to data practices requests. But I do think we want to save any language about ongoing until we have our budget discussion. So to me, this is a conversation for me to be able to support it about how do we identify resources to carry us to a time when under our proper processes in the city, we then evaluate that as part of our budget process. Because otherwise we kind of start the examples of, you know, this happens all the time in the city of reassessing and should we go outside of our budget process to make determinations about ongoing resources. So, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
If I may. So the first part is about how this works with an ongoing discussion. I do think that I solved that with the amended motion before you because it does acknowledge that this is a recommendation that we suggest police department finance would make in their next budget cycle. So we aren't adding ongoing bodies here now. We're saying let's use some of the money that we still have left in what we've already allocated to start this and see how it goes. In regards to the backlog, I appreciate that. I think that with the current backlog, we could more than assume these two positions and just be in a better place with the Records Information Unit without a body camera program. But I do think that as soon as we do begin this body camera program, I greatly anticipate that there will be additional requests, and it will be especially important that we do well by this police body camera program, both in terms of how this is one of our elements of work to change, to do the kinds of reform work that we've promised from the Minneapolis Police Department and to do it very publicly. I also know that even if we assume that the state will act this year, as Deputy Chief Glampy said very appropriately, which likely they won't, and even if they choose to make all the information gathered by body-worn cameras private, which they likely won't, we still have this backlog, but we will still be getting quite a bit of new requests in, and that's been not yet scoped through our own pilot, but it has been witnessed through the development of other body camera pilot programs across the country, which Deputy Chief Glampy has been visiting and has been knowledgeable and has been part of that work effort. So I think it's more than reasonable to assume that we are going to need some additional resources in this unit to try to achieve that kind of public transparency and accountability that we're seeking and to do a really good job by this body camera pilot off the bat.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do want to apologize to the author for not being available earlier to discuss this in the day. So I really like the intent of all of this, and so I do have some questions around it. Obviously, I'm a big open data proponent, data access person, and so I think to Councilmember Palmisano's point, this is so important that we get this right off the bat, that we're responding quickly, because I know in some cases we're not timely whatsoever, and it has a bad perception and bad outcomes for those looking for data. But from my talking with the chief previously about different allocations of positions, isn't that already something within her authority, or isn't she able to kind of do that as needed? And is there an issue here around the total number of allocations for the department? Is that part of this? That we would need more allocated FTE for the department overall, so then within that, she would be able to allocate as needed for this public data request?
Yeah, I'm going to defer to
Ms.
Ms.
McPherson.
McPherson.
Mr. Chair, council members, thank you. We have a number of FTEs that are assigned to us. In the police department, we use bell-shaped curve staffing, but I will tell you right now we have virtually very few open positions that we would be able to reallocate the number of FTEs. I believe I understand what Councilmember Palmisano is saying is that based on our estimated costs, we're going to be coming under budget for what we have for, correct me if I'm wrong, but under budget for what we have in the budget for the $1.8 million for the year. And so my understanding is taking that amount that we're under budget, which is approximately $150,000, and allocating 2 new FTEs for these positions. So we have in this budget the funds to do that, okay? What we don't have is, and I'll let DC Glampy answer whether we need them or not, but what we would need is some direction that said, yes, the council approves the additional 2 FTEs in and beyond our current budgeted FTE count in order to make those hires.
I appreciate that. That does make a lot of sense, and then I can see the need for something like that in this directive. I would maybe make a friendly suggestion to the author that we don't limit these positions to the body cam deployment, but just kind of leave it more open of increasing by 2 additional FTEs using existing resources. That way, the chief is able to adjust as needed as that workload may change. And then further, just more of an enterprise-wide comment. I hope, and I'm happy to work with staff on this, that we start focusing on outcome-based goals for Data Practice Act requests rather than tying to a specific number of FTE. That way it's more flexible so that we say we want to answer 95% of our requests within 14 days. And so that we have a goal like that coming in the door for something like our body cam footage. And then if we're not meeting that threshold, the chief can quickly, and under the authority granted within a council-approved goal like that, ramp up resources as needed to be able to meet that goal. So I'll just throw that out there as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, council members, may I just a point of clarification? And I'm going to say something that Ms. Christensen usually says. One of the things we have to remember is that if there is an additional 2 FTEs that are assigned or that are approved, then these, of course, go on for future years. So right now, we're anticipating the next 4 years' cost of $1.2 million, which is what we've been saying. That would not include that we would have to adjust that then for the additional FTEs. And if DC Glampy wants to answer the second part of the question regarding needs.
Mr. Chair and council members, I can tell you, I confirmed this morning, last year, I believe we were right around 75,000 to 80,000 data requests just for the police department. Now, granted, some of those are simple. You show up and say, I'd like my police report or my accident report. Those are relatively simple things, matter of seconds, you walk out the door. A lot of them are much more complex. Give me all the data related to this incident, and you have body cams, squad video, street cams, license plate readers, police reports. It gets very voluminous. So to go from 75 to 80,000 in 2014, we are going to, when the final numbers come in, approach 150,000 data requests to the police department for 2015. That is a tremendous number. I mean, and talking to Christian earlier today, and I understand Councilmember Palmisano that, we looked at that 400%. It doubled and then doubled again. So 2 FTEs, even before body cameras get here, I could more than use those in a capacity in my records unit to be more efficient, which Councilmember Johnson, I agree with you 100%. To get this data out in a timely manner is so important. and would certainly go a long ways to doing that. So I'm not going to turn down or tell you that we wouldn't be able to use those bodies. We certainly would, and we would do it very efficiently. It's not like we would be, people would be sitting on their hands. There is more than enough work for those bodies before we even start looking at body cameras.
Sir, thank you. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'll echo some of the questions and concerns that the other council members have raised. We literally just adopted our budget 2 months ago. And so the place, in my opinion, to add FTEs for capacity for existing work would have been 2 months ago during that budget process, so that we could equally, at the same time that we're adding bodies to a place that we have needs, understand what the ramifications might be for other departments, maybe sworn officers who wouldn't be hired or whatever, or a property tax levy increase, however it would be that we would pay for those additional bodies. And that's what I'm not hearing still. I understand that we have some savings in this year's budget, but when we start to add ongoing FTEs, that doesn't really matter. What matters is the ongoing balance of our budget over time. And so I still don't have an answer. I don't think, maybe it's to Ms. Christensen or someone, that what would be a funding source for ongoing FTEs for these positions? Would it be cuts in other places of the police department, or cuts in other parts of the city enterprise, or how would we be covering that over time?
And Mr. Chair and Councilmember Bender, at this time, I would just say this is not a request of the police departments. So I want to be very clear that this would be something that we would certainly accept and make good use of, but we are not coming forward. So as far as our funding source, we're not prepared to do that today, because this is not something we're asking for. So I don't know if, Robin, if you have anything, but that's kind of our position on it right now.
Just maybe since we seem to be kind of conflating potentially, current needs related to data requests, which I understand are increasing. It sounds like we need to do some thinking about that for the long term. But with the body camera issue, which is ostensibly what we were talking about today, but so we've finished a pilot. I'm not on the public safety committee, so I'm probably not as up to speed as some of my colleagues, but have we assessed through that pilot how many additional hours came in through requests for body camera, or do we have a prediction for why we would need 2 more FTE specifically for body cameras based on the pilot program?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bender, so we created approximately 30,000 videos in our pilot project, and we did get a give us all your body camera video request. The best context I can put it in is if 6 police officers show up in an incident that's 10 minutes long, that's 60 minutes worth of body camera video. 60 times 10, or 6 times 10, that is 1 hour of video somebody has to watch from beginning to end for that one incident. And considering we do, close to 500,000 calls a year, we're not certain what we're going to get in the end when we go, full, everybody with body cameras. So we are trying to be very responsible in adding those original 2 people to kind of start our whole program, not just the pilot, but the whole program. And that's based on what we learned in the pilot project and what a slow, tedious process it is. And that's before you even have to start doing any redacting. That's why our thought was, let's get into this, come back next year when we have to identify for you, where are we going to get this money? If we come to you and say, we need 40 people, well, it's our responsibility then to tell you, this is where we need the money. If we don't need those people, we didn't want to be in a position to come back and go, wow, we really overshot it. Now we got to get rid of some people, or we're not spending our money responsibly. So the goal is to get into this and come back next year to answer that very question, and to, as accurately as possible, tell you this is exactly how many people we need going forward to 17, 18, and, however long into the future.
And maybe one final question was, 6 months from now, say we're into the body camera program and you find you need staff, we have mechanisms in place for the department to hire staff as needed in the middle of budget cycles. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Council Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, kind of big picture wise, I want to say that my understanding is that while the police department may have one of the most severe issues, I actually don't know. Maybe this is wrong for me to say, but just knowing how many data practices requests that you get and how many more that you may get through the body camera program, you may be one of the departments that is facing the greatest resource needs around data practices, but this is not the only place in the city where we have challenges meeting data practices requests on a timely basis or up to the standards that we would like to be. And I want to thank Sandy Christensen, who just forwarded me a reminder that there were 6 requests from departments enterprise-wide requesting, as part of last year's budget, additional resources for handling data practices requests. So we know that departments themselves are identifying these issues. I still feel a little challenged by the fact that this is outside of our budget process, as well as I'm still struggling with this language on the body cameras when it seems like what we've heard from the clerk's office and other places is that we have backups and they don't relate to the body cameras, even though we may, in fact, not have enough resources with 2 additional people for body cameras. We still have yet to assess that once the program gets underway. So I have a suggestion for modifying this staff direction, and so I'll just say it's, from my perspective, something that would allow me to support it, because I really do honestly support this very important issue that Councilmember Palmisano is bringing up, and I don't want to lose sight of that. And there may need to be some additional direction too, unless this is already happening, with asking someone from the city to kind of convene more of an enterprise-wide group to better assess our data practices needs and kind of fold that into talking to the mayor's office about next year's budget. So we are doing a better job in really getting a handle on these issues. This is kind of one of these internal services issues that often gets kind of shoved under the rug until you realize, wow, we have really not done something the way that we need to or we want to. So this is my suggestion on amending this staff direction. I would keep paragraphs 1, 2, and 3. I would eliminate paragraph 4, and I would change paragraph 5 to read as follows: direct Minneapolis Police Department finance staff to develop a budget recommendation regarding ongoing costs for the purposes of managing and responding to public data requests. That, in my mind, gives the department the direction that we want to see this kind of request come forward, but you have the flexibility to assess and determine what is the need that's there. And again, it seems like the need is relating more than to body cameras, so I was a little concerned about limiting the direction just to that when we have heard about other issues. And then I will say, just again, Councilmember Palmisano, since you're very tapped into this issue, it seems like we also need an enterprise-wide approach to what is the budget request here. So I will go ahead and move that. I'll go ahead and move that amendment.
Thank you.
I know they changed the 5, but the 4th part, is it deleting the 4th part?
Right. So I recommended deleting that 4th paragraph. I agree with Councilmember Johnson and with finance staff that I think the chief today, working with her finance staff, would be able to identify a way to fit mid-year needs for that department without a specific direction. So I, again, kind of am concerned to put a direction in there that, again, gets ahead of the budget process. But I think, frankly, this conversation is probably a big signal to police department administration staff that we are concerned about this issue. We want to make sure that they're doing their best job to watch this issue too, and that we think this is an important function of the city responding to these data practices requests.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there have been a lot of questions posed kind of at me, and then we've amended this motion, and I'm comfortable with that. I want to say this, that I expressed significant concerns about this program last year through the budget process. Those may have not been out in public quite so much, but we did have very specific recommendations from our internal audit report. One has to do with video redactions, and that was taken up by our mayor and proposed, and we all passed that. The part that wasn't was the public data request aspect of it. There were 0 additional resources called out in terms of having this back-end process. And Ms. McPherson is correct. I was referring to it's 128,000. She said approximately 150,000 that is expected to be remaining in this previous budget allocation this year. To me, this is about administration of a program, and to me, this is about our city council saying, along with this body camera investment, that we acknowledge and we want to make the most public, transparent process with body cameras that we can. It's not just about cameras, and we all understand and appreciate that. I do know that it will be coming soon. The records management audit report and the city clerk's response to that is coming in a future committee of the whole. So don't worry, from an enterprise perspective, we are about to really get a handle on this from that enterprise-wide side of things. Also, last week, I do want to point out that I have some philosophical differences, I think, than Councilmember Johnson in terms of who should be the person making the decisions on this. I don't think that the best, highest use of our body camera program should be part of internal affairs. That is the internal facing side of a body camera program, but to build something where requests can be triaged, I don't think that our own police department should triage requests. It's not that they're not capable of doing so, but I think the best way to hold the public trust in how we process ongoing and increasing amount of public data requests would actually be more like in the city clerk's office that I had mentioned last week. So I do appreciate the need for us to look at the data governance perspective of all of this and to manage it through the right channels as an enterprise. And I suggested this change because it is really about how we support and put resources behind the public trust end of the body camera program. So I am comfortable with the Council Vice President's suggestion on this motion as it's written. I do hope that that extra projected money that we've already budgeted for will be used to support and to fund and to add resources to our records information unit. And yeah, so I just wanted to respond to those requests.
Comfortable with that? Thank you. Let's thank you for the work. First of all, it was just a routine item here, a contract with Taser, $4 million. It's good we had a discussion on some other stuff. But obviously, it's a big deal, and so it did take up an opportunity here that we did not let get past. So thank you for your work on that. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to belabor this, but I think it's important to remember that there were a significant amount of budget requests from departments last year that were not funded because we don't have the funding available to support them. And so each of these decisions is a matter of policy priorities that we make through the budget process. So it may very well be, again, that in the future we choose to either raise property taxes or cut other important services in order to better respond to public requests. And I think public data availability is extremely important. But that's the real conversation. That's the question in front of us. Not is this important, but how is it funded and how does it fit in with all of the other city priorities?
Exactly correct. Thank you. Okay. On the amended staff direction, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And on the underlying motion, all those in favor, please say aye. 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 And so that item passes. Thank you very much, everyone. I think that concludes our business for the day. So we stand adjourned.